And welcome, everybody. This is Governance Working Group Call number 67 for Stacks. It's a pleasure to have you guys with us, as always. We've been having some really nice sessions as of late, real productive and insightful when it comes to SIPs, when it comes to other nuances of mining and things like this. I've really appreciated, especially how it relates to governance and transparency, upskilling, especially from my perspective in all of this technology and the processes that come along with it, right? Jude being a whole wealth of information when it comes to the history there and how other networks work, and Jason as well, giving us a whole lot of insights through the SIPs process from the governance side and the governance cab. So, but today's interesting, right? Because at least for myself, we have Andre with us and Jason as always. And for the last, couple of weeks or since the last time we saw each other here, I was able to join some of the CityCoin sessions, get familiar with some of their flows, models, proposals they're thinking about governance-wise, the governance-specific sessions that I've been joining. I've appreciated, some of their efforts, right, in terms of ensuring local voices, particularly, right, are being heard in respect to CityCoin's governance and some of their new governance tokens approaches. So it's helped me put in perspective some of the things that we're doing with advocates and some of the things we've spoken to here in, the system design, right, of these indigenous modes, right, and bottom-up systems design approaches and models, and how all-encompassing they are, right? One of the things that I've seen pop up in these CityCoins discussions are many different layers, right? I think it was spoken to a little bit in the session in terms of the different layers of governance or systems design, even that pops up when just thinking about governance in some of the more conventional ways, right? And so, trying to modify that to ensure some more direct access to voice and engagement, these type of things. And so, in the last couple of weeks, we've also been doing our thing in advocates and relates to finally attaching system design onto our tooling. And we recently got some things straightened out in Discord that should help us kickstart some of the flows for consensus that we've been able to achieve. But one of the things that came across was how maybe without realizing it, how we're thinking of many of the different layers that the CityCoins has started to laying out with these different governance proposals. Some folks more focused on the nuances of what's happening on the ground in organization and in chapters part of CityCoins, which is more of the on the ground local engagement aspect to some of their governance models. And this has been really insightful, right? To bringing us back to some of the long discussions we've had in advocates over a few weeks with folks like Hero and other folks here with us, Merrick Haas, Fred as well, going through, some of the nuances of our system design and, making sure that we have this bottom-up horizontal structure, right? But how that also is empowered all the way up into these representatives, right? And some of the delegation conversations in CityCoins is, I think, overlaps in some ways with some of our approaches to delegation, but truly empowered paths to representation, right? That kind of dovetail with the ability to remove power as soon as that power is needed to be removed, right? This is, I think, one of the fundamental aspects of delegation modes that we've seen in our direct dialogue with the Ginyaga Haga and what might other be seen as the Iroquois or Five Nations Longhouse Confederacy, Mohawk, right? And these folks that have really at the foundation of democratic structures, right? Before they get modified, right? So some of these intact original democratic structures, right? That, before it was deemed democracy, how these consensus flows occurred, how they protected for voices of women, ecosystems, and ensured a horizontality, right? And so this is, some of the things we might get into later today, but as we've started to try to layer on the clan system, right, onto our tooling, we've started to learn more just in trying to figure out how to get started, right? We started to learn about some of these deeper aspects of the protocol and the flows and some of the benefits of it. So I'll shut up my stand up for now, but I'm excited to get into some of the nuances of of governance today, potentially after some good conversation and pickup, right, in terms of use of the tooling and the plan design for the first times in recent weeks from the advocates. And maybe this will lend itself to some of the conversation in general, right, about governance today. But yeah, I'll pass on the stand-up to folks that want to share something. I know folks have been working right alongside me in some of these efforts and pushing them forward more so than myself even. Speaking to Hero, Fred, Haas, that have making sure these efforts are initiated and continuing, right? So thank you kindly for those here, and I'll pass it on to folks.
All right, well, thank you for that. I'll jump in next since we were talking a little bit about Citicoin stuff and some of the things going on there. And I just want to say I appreciate everyone making the time to, bring over your knowledge and learnings and input from what we've done here and just from your thinking in general into what we're doing there, because I think that's going to be a huge help. And overall, just love seeing, we're all doing a lot of good work. So the more we can leverage that and use that in more places, the more powerful and more impactful what we're doing will become. So with that in mind, just wanted to send that shout out to you guys for being there and appreciate it. As far as the stand-ups go, I am basically, that was one of my goals to work toward, was to help bring some of the group into our discussions as Citicoins is looking at like DAO structures and essentially like power structures that would be able to control things from funds to proposals to ideas. A lot of this just dovetails perfectly with what's going on already. What I will be working on next is a little undetermined at the time. I've been playing catch up since the upgrade still and haven't had as much time, but over the next 2 weeks, I do see there are some new SIPs coming down the pipeline that are actually very interesting. And with that is going to be the review process from the cabs. So, anybody who's interested in the cab or has thought about it before or was part of one, just a heads up, those are coming up. And definitely we're going to be starting some more discussions and engagement around getting the people within these cabs together. So yeah, definitely encourage anybody to voice that they're interested if they are.
Thank you kindly, Jason. Thank you kindly. And blockers for myself, I forgot. For now, I think will be in terms of some of the things that are ongoing with the tooling and the clan design. Well, I think the only blockers will be, I think, bringing in as many people as possible. I think there's some folks that have been following along real closely with the use of this system design along with the tooling. But there's others that are fairly new to advocates and maybe need some exposure to the system design a little bit further before coming in. But hopefully the tooling can engender this, right? And it's one of the things that we're hopeful for, right, in terms of how it can engender participation, how it can encourage this collective responsibility to use your power, use your voice, right? And so, and over the next 2 weeks, I think this is what we'll be focusing on, right? But thank you kindly, Jason, for all of these updates in terms of the SIPs and the cab. I think we can get into the details of that a little bit later as well. I know there's some updates, right? I don't think Jenny's here with us, but yeah, I think that we can get into that a little bit deeper. But yeah, if there's anybody else, there's anything to add in terms of what folks have been working on and what they might be up to in coming weeks, please, please. Floor is open.
I can go next. We had our first successful journey. The Bitcoin Pizza Day in Porto Alegre, Brazil. The event was a success in terms of impact. 2 politicians met there and they submitted to City Council, making the Bitcoin Pizza Day, May 22nd, the commemorative day of that city, which blew my mind. The event was live streamed and live translated to English and is on YouTube. I encourage you all to check it out, to see the quality of the interviews and the presentations. So that's one thing. It was led by Agva, our community member, and funded in part by the foundation and by me. um, the difference between this and a usual grant is it's based mostly on trust, since Agva would not have had a track record if he did not have an event already. So you can't like submit a grant and actually obtain trust and a trust them without doing actual work. And in events, that's possible. We started first, but then it actually worked. It was almost a miracle with the crash happening during the preparation for the event and everything. So super proud of my dude Agva. But yeah, nothing else other than that.
No, that was huge, right? That type of coordination is pretty much impossible for folks like myself to even imagine, let alone pull it off and have it go like that. And so it was beautiful to see. And yeah, I know Agva came in one of these sessions extremely grateful as it was as we were heading up to it. So it's a beautiful thing to see, and I think a huge point of accessibility, right, being extended to what is the grants program, right, and speaks to bottom up values, right, in terms of being able to initiate even that type of support for yourself somehow, some way, especially with that amount of value for the ecosystem sitting there, right? It shows the value of bottom up system design, right, and what it can engender. So I don't think it can be overstated what the miracle that got pulled off in that way. So thank you kindly, Oz, in every way for ensuring that goes through. And yeah, we'll get on to other folks' stand-ups if there's any the folks want to share with us before we move on. Floor is open. Yeah. Well, we'll take that as folks don't have anything to share or they don't want to. It's fine. We have Andre with us. I don't know if Andre, you'd like to introduce yourself or give a brief stand-up. I know you've been up to a lot of governance and it's related to the Stacks ecosystem somehow, some way.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. My name is Andre. I'm a core contributor over at CityCoins. And, we've been really heads down lately, really thinking about governance and how we can start to form a DAO around CityCoins. So I wanted to first of all thank Jason for, inviting you all to participate and for you all to show up over the past couple of weeks. Just hearing some of the things that you all have been thinking about lately, I think it's clear that there's a lot that we can kind of learn from you all and sort of reinforce the ways that we're thinking about governance. And Harold, I think you had a lot of good points about some of the key sort of principles that we're looking at around bottoms up governance, making sure that residents' voices are heard as part of this process, having necessary checks and balances in case where it makes sense. And we're early in this process, but I think that it has a lot of potential for CityCoins and for us to think about or change the way that we think about governance broadly within our actual communities. And so, yeah, this is my first working group call. So just really looking to be a fly on the wall and try to pick up some things that we can carry back over to the CityCoins call next week.
Beautiful, beautiful to have you, Mike. No, there's a lot of interesting overlap in some of the proposals already emerging, as I mentioned earlier. And yeah, I can't wait to get into the forum and to get into some of the weeds with y'all in some of those sessions, right? Some of the just open-ended questions around democratic structures and the blending of it with commons and dialogue, right, particularly, right, which is what a whole lot of our tooling is based around, right? These indigenous protocols for long-term sustainability and or bottom-up systems design are based in this Tua Wampum history, peace treaty, the legal jurisprudence internationally. But the indigenous translation is Degni de Ahade, and it's essentially about dialogue. How do you bring even opposing viewpoints together in dialogue? And what are the protocols to come into consensus on positions through that dialogue and the transformative potential wrapped up in all of that? And I think it speaks to a lot of what Citicoins is trying to achieve innovation-wise, what can be achieved innovation-wise in Web3, and a lot of what we might be able to get into some today is interesting, right? The work that Haas has been able to pull off with hacking away at PolicyKit, which is this extension of the MetaGov research group, actually, with Primavera de Filippi at the helm of that and other folks from all over the world helping that particular research group forward. This PolicyKit, Haas has been able to hack away and really wrap it around Discord, which was intended for like other, in any client, right? Console DAO or whatever comes about, right? Especially anything that's open source. But Haas has made it possible so that, things can get updated right from threads into this PolicyKit, which has all these on-chain, off-chain capacities. And so we're interested in that, dovetailing with some of what you saw from Haas already in terms of the micro DAO creation capacities and tooling that can end up in things like that at Brazil Bitcoin Pizza Day. And so we're really excited about even some of the what are still small iterations of this tooling and testing, but the overlap in the proposals that are happening simultaneously in Citicoin is really grounding for whatever reason to see, right? And exciting to get into dialogue about, so to speak. But yeah, we can move on. Pleasure to have everybody here with us. And we can get into maybe some foundation stuff that's always relevant, especially for folks who aren't familiar with it. I don't know how much we want to speak to this today, considering I think a lot of folks here today have been in recent sessions where we got into some of the importance of this. And so, I think this relates a lot to DAO-like structures as well. I think Juliet, who I think want to be one of the best people to speak to this with some of the experience that that she's had when it comes to this position and figuring it out, how it can look. And she's been working, alongside us at the GovLab, trying to figure the best ways forward. And I think is excited for some of this tooling that we've been mentioning to achieve this. And we spoke briefly to this. Hero, I know yourself and Juliet may have been having some dialogue on this. Do you have any updates for us on this, or just some general thoughts that you can give us?
On which topic?
This is the board nominations, particularly the community board rep seat. I think is one of the.
I think I mentioned also last time. I'm not fully understanding the board seat thing. She has mentioned the community rep thing, which was when I first heard it like a few months back, and that triggered my interest. But like I don't think there is any. I don't think anything has been done officially on that. But lately, she's mentioned about the conflict resolution in code of conduct. So that's when Juliet mentioned that as part of the code of conduct in at least Stacks Advocates DAO, the community rep could be the one initiating some of these conflict resolution, or could be the one to go to, or maybe handle some part of it. because the community rep is the one that looking after making sure the community is healthy and happy and stuff like that. So that conflict resolution part of the whenever it occurs, whenever that's needed, the community rep would have a part to play in it. And it is quite kind of interesting because I was in the Citadel call the past couple of weeks, and last week I think Andrew mentioned conflict resolution, like a small part of it. It was a small part of the conversation, and we've been looking into that lately. Because we are also coming up with a proper process for handling conflict resolution. That's it.
No, thank you. It's nice to get some insights on, without doing it here, right? I know you've had some dialogue with it recently, and, I guess it is some of the more recent evolutions, right? Of if we're thinking on that's coming in from other angles in the ecosystem potentially, right? In terms of some of the responsibilities or things that can be picked up by the community rep. And I think that conversation gets convoluted a lot with the board seat and the different approaches that that can be taken, right, based on some of the legal frameworks of the foundation. I think this can evolve too, particularly with the advocates and the changing of the legal frameworks, similar to some of the Citicoins discussion, right, in terms of Cayman and things like this. I think it'd be important for us to think about as advocates too, and how that dovetails with preserving community values and long-term sustainability, right? So maybe we'll get into that eventually. It's a whole conversation that involves the Primavera and folks as well, exit to community folks from Metagov.
But before we jump into actions real quick though, sorry to cut you off. I just want to say, as far as the foundation stuff goes, what we can do is we can write a new issue to replace this one, because every time we come across it, we have to do a full explanation, and there ends up being like different buckets of people, and it's hard to understand. So that's something I'll take on, and I'll verify it with the foundation side to make sure it's correct. But you have a actual community board seat, which can be like a board member who has to have insurance and go through a whole process. You have the community representative that can attend board meetings, and that's somebody who can take on it's like a larger responsibility, but it's a voice for the community and the different working groups. And then you have the consideration advisory boards, which are part of the SIP process. So they're actually three separate things, and we tend to go over them each time. So instead of over rotating on those this time, let me go ahead and write that up in a way that makes more sense. And by the next one, we'll be able to breeze through these issues.
Beautiful. Thank you kindly, Jason. Yes. That's one of the things I noticed too. And I give the caveat before we get into it. And I think it does change every time we have new people here with us. We feel obligated to get into it a little bit deeper, right? So thank you kindly. I agree. Before we go into this, let's see. I don't think we have Ryder here with us. I'm not sure exactly what they meant by this, or if anybody is familiar with DWork. Yeah.
Yeah, so DWork is an application that's out there. It's at dwork.xyz, but it's basically like an integration of GitHub, Asana for like task management, and crypto. And what's cool about it is they did add a Stacks authentication that you're able to use. So you're able to log in with Stacks, you're able to pay in Stacks, and they were working on SIP10 as well. And it was just a thought, we have all of these great tools out here. It would be cool to learn from, like, is this something we could use? Would this make sense for paying bounties? But I know it kind of overlaps with the work being done with MicroDAOs. More so it came out of a conversation just between Ryder and I, how we can make this experience of GitHub easier for people. Because not everybody wants to jump on GitHub. It actually presents a large learning curve for people. So this would be like an interface where somebody could see open tasks and be able to do things. That in mind, it's not something that I think is critical. I just think it's good that we keep thinking down these different avenues to make this easier for everyone, especially as we start introducing any kind of new features around it too, of like, how do we track our work? How do we make sure we're up to date on things? It's working now, but how do we make it better?
I think this also dovetails with some of the conversations we've been having with Dada, and hopefully some of the very soon collaborations and I think it's essentially project management, but could overlap with version control in some ways. But
Harold, it's just like bounties. Someone you can have like a board that has to do in progress, in review, and like done. Some people might post these bounties as tasks, and some people with specific roles can pick up these tasks to be working on to work on it, or someone can assign them. Someone from the organization can assign them, and once it's in review, the person in the organization who's responsible of paying that bounty can move it to done, and then sign a transaction that sends the amount to that person. It can be in terms of think of someone recording this meeting and uploading that to YouTube. You can put that bounty up in To Do and assign it to someone, and they can move it around until you move it to done, and then you can pay them like 20x or something.
Wow.
That's basically it.
Oh yeah! Wow! No, thank you. We're spelling that out. Yeah, I know. Jason, you touched on it briefly, but no, yeah, that it seems like there's potentially, especially with GitHub, right? I've heard a lot of different strains of conversation in different working groups now about some of the restrictions of GitHub, right? And how it's almost coming in more of a LinkedIn like atmosphere in terms of accessibility and other types of things that come into the space. So this is interesting stuff for a lot of reasons. But yeah, I do see the MacroDAO connection that you mentioned, Jason, as well. So maybe this is something that supplements things as it comes along or as it evolves. So thanks for getting this in there. I don't know, maybe we fill out this issue a little bit more as
yeah, let me add some details there. We can discuss what's possible, what makes sense, if this is something we want to use. Just like Haas was saying too, you can have criteria of who can sign up. So it could even be anyone can sign up, or after you sign up, you have to be approved to take the task. You can attach prior work. You sort of build a reputation over time. So it's got some potential, but I think it's got a lot we can at least learn from. And in that sense, it might be fun to try a small demo of take a small piece of something with 3 tasks and just see what the flows are like and if it makes any sense. But I'm happy to fill that one in. We'll have that by next time we talk.
Beautiful. No, I mean, it sounds like it could be a tool for accessibility of a lot of tools, not just project management stuff, but even getting things off the ground. Yeah, I know we've touched on this a couple of times as well. Jason, do you want to get into this at all again, or should it be considered along with?
Yeah, I'd say let's just keep moving. This is just for theming the website. Nothing special right now.
Beautiful. All right, and I know this is something that's popped up recently as well in terms of Jenny getting some emails out to folks. Do we want to include some of what Jenny's trying to get accomplished in those emails in this issue to make it another point of access for folks? Or, I think Jenny is reigniting some of these efforts when it comes to some of the CAB work that was touched on it briefly earlier. And these are important groups that will have specific categories, whether it be governance or ethics or et cetera, to overlook particular things that pop up in the ecosystem, right, that might relate to these things. And we've been trying to organize folks around these important consideration advisory boards, right, that review these important stacks improvement proposals as much as possible, and can present something to the people as it relates to their particular category of ethics, governance, economics, potentially, and it's kind of open-ended. Jude likes to remind us in terms of the types of SIPs there can be as well, and the type of CABs there can be. So I'll open up the floor for any ways we can move forward some of the recent movements from Jenny as it relates to this issue or this discussion. Okay. I know that are other folks here familiar with the recent emails from Jenny as it relates to getting folks together? I know it was more or less just some coordination stuff. Maybe that'll be important to include here for folks, like Hero to even point other folks too. I know Hero, you're interested in some of this potential CAB work, right?
Yeah, I don't know about the email. I'm not on the email, but Jude, well, just because attending some of these sessions, I hear from you guys and Jason about this CAB. So I that's how I sort of went into the thing and made the request to Jude if I can be included in one of the panels. And so I'm already on one of the panels called diversity, thanks to Jude. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting together or just like start taking some actions.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think you'll see some movement.
And it's through that process, I think I was so confused about how to make a request for it, because you have to do all this different fancy stuff on GitHub. And that's how I sort of added a point. If you scroll up a little bit, basically to say a lot of these participation, some of these things are, unless you are dev, it's Jason mentioned, like unless you're a dev, like it's quite hard to get in. But so it's just a minor point really, because I can't imagine everybody knows how to use GitHub. And that leads to the discussion of the SIP process, the participation of people voicing their yes or no for SIP. I think that's really the key thing, because that is the consensus and that is a critical part about coming to a consensus like Bitcoin, because there's no other protocol needs to can have such decentralization. And for me, if the closer we can get to Bitcoin, for me, that would be my dream. Like that would be amazing to see on Stacks.
No, thank you, Colin. It looks like there's some added points that maybe dovetail from Jojo as well here, our writer. When it comes to accessibility, right? And I think this all lends itself to engagement. And, maybe it's something, Hero, that we can leverage some of the tooling for as well, right? In terms of engendering some of the engagement around, these important SIPs and having as many different categories as needed, right? And involvement. So it looks like there's some conversation from Jasper and Ryder here as well, that Ryder made sure to include. That looks like they're getting a little bit deeper into this, right? So thank you kindly for speaking to that again.
That looks like that might have been the meeting we had. So I'm Jasper now. But no, this was good. So, we were talking about how to get involved with the CABs, like what's going on with the SIPs, and just a little more about the general process, and also like bringing things more into the light, right? Like there's a lot of discussions that happen on the Stacks-Network, Stacks-Blockchain repo, which is the main place that the blockchain code is kept. And those discussions cover things like, should we wait and launch a giant 2.1 update, or should we break this into smaller pieces and do releases? And that's something that everybody could provide input on before it becomes a SIP or anything else. So helping to raise awareness just of where to look for these things was definitely a big part of this discussion. And then on top of that too, with what you were saying with Jenny, I did get a copy of that email, and Hero, I'll sync with you to make sure you get a copy of that. But basically, we're looking to just start talking about like what the responsibilities are like. Should we start a working group call? Where and how to facilitate more of these discussions around SIPs, and how to like encourage and just bring in more contributions as well. So I think we're going to start to see the idea of these CABs and the idea of SIP review and changes to the blockchain and regular release cadences all start to form with the basis of what we started with already. So it's going to expand a bit, it's going to change, and I think that'll put a lot of us into contact down that track. And it'll be interesting to see what overlap that has with the governance working group as it gets better defined.
Yes.
That's interesting, because today I commented on the post. I'll send it to you. Jude is already on there. I think Gina started it. But yeah, I'll send it to you. Some thoughts. but yeah, I think it links with what you just described.
Beautiful. This is exciting stuff, to say the least. Thank you, Kami, for all the input. Yeah, I want to leave the floor open too, if in case I'm leaving folks out of anything they want to add here. But yeah, I think we can skip this as well. We would need Juliet here with us. I think on some of the work that she was doing there, and I think we'll see some movement on this as we've gotten some new roles in Discord that should help some flows. And I'm really interested in some of Juliet's work in just really keying in on the importance of code of conducts legally, some of the legal DAO framework stuff that's been going on. And she's been following Primavera pretty closely. But I'm also interested in how this overlaps with more living declarations or code of conduct, right? There's some overlap between those indigenous modes, that real life jurisprudence that I spoke to earlier, in the Tura Wampum and the history there. But just some of the understandings too of bottom-up organization, and how anything written down is always only going to be a reminder of what's living, active conversations with folks that evolved, right, based on circumstances, understandings of human place and time. And so I don't know if this dovetails with some of the illegal or in-between spaces that Primavera started to play with in terms of DAO structures and how it relates to preservation of values, or just gets us out of some of the choppiness of conventional structures in overlapping these things in the Web3 space, as they've been overlapped before historically, apparently, right? Just unbeknownst to most of us. So that's one thing that I think is coming out of some of the discussions on how code of conduct can start to evolve in our tooling, to Haz's points about having code of conduct, really how important it is to engender participation of code of conduct for it to be more than just this top-down structuring of things. So I'll move on from that and get into some of the more recent things we've been doing with the DAO tool. I don't know if Haz, you'd like to speak to this with folks like Andre here a little bit better than I can, right? These are some of the exciting things going on when it comes to journeys that we spoke to earlier. And of course, this always plugs into decision-making tooling that we've been working on, that also leverages system design and clan design that we've been working hard on in advocates in these sessions weekly. So I don't know, I think it makes sense to start with some of the, we can even have a live demo potentially, Haz, if you're with us and up for it, or if it's possible. Is Haz with us still? I wonder. Maybe not. But this is already possible to play with right inside of the Stacks server. It's already been integrated. And so if you just, start to play with the bot commands, all of this stuff will pop up for you. And, you can see right in the Explorer, right, the creation of a DAO. You can play with some of the built-in tooling for, rejecting a DAO, right, with dissent, right, as opposed to majority vote. Another nuance of the tooling that speaks to some of our system design. And one of the things that we really wanted to get across to Citicoins, right? Oh, here goes Haz. In terms of some of the conventional things that get picked up, right, in the democratic structures that we're most exposed to, right? This idea from this direct dialogue with the Ginyaga Haga about consensus, right? and the importance of not splitting the mind, the collective minds, before having the chance to come to consensus, right? I see a little bit of that in what's happening in city coins governance discussions as of late, right? There's this beautiful flow back and forth of people touching on all these different layers of governance models and organization models, right? And it's really open, right? Folks are open to hearing each other. Folks are open to implementing different nuances of each other's things, and sense making in that way, right? And but as soon as you put a majority vote on what to decide on, right, which is fine for like prioritization, we learned from the Longhouse directly, right, with the Nyaga Haga. But when it comes to like just core decision making things, it's one of the fundamental things that was changed, right, from the learnings of these so-called founding fathers, right, when they're sitting on 2 wampum councils, right, and they're getting their ideas for federalism, they're getting their ideas for the first modern democratic structures that we are exposed to today. And this is one of the fundamental things that Haas took a hold to and started to build into the tooling in different ways. And so you'll see it even at the edges of the tooling, far away from core decision-making protocols that are in other parts that can be found in this link here. But it's one of the things that allows it to be cohesive from the bottom all the way to the top in terms of representation. One of the best analogies I can think of, right, in terms of the dangers of majority vote, happen to be this particular hemisphere, right, which has seen a massive change in the demographics of people on the hemisphere, on the land, right, but there still are native people here, right, still native people here with a whole lot to offer us, and a lot of our innovations, is a large reason why myself and others are here in this governance call, but it's with majority vote, right, their voices could be rendered valueless, right, or powerless in terms of having a voice in structures. And so it shows you some of the weirdness, right, that can come with majority vote, and can be played with and tampered with, right, in different ways. And that's one of the things that popped up, right, as folks were, even with elections, right, and things like this, it can add to the complexity of what folks have to consider in design of systems. And it's something I realized when in the CityCoin call, folks were contemplating other things that might happen with elections or the ways to design for it. And I think it's another thing that happens with majority vote in different ways, right? But yeah, Haas, I see that you came back in here. I wanted to speak a little bit to the journeys tooling and what is already doable. I don't know if you're available for a short, quick demo of how those bot commands work, and so I don't miss anything about some of the new things that you've added in terms of the different cryptocurrencies that are available and to be transferred and things like this. Do you want to get into this a little bit better than I can? And maybe I can speak more to the system design if we have time.
Yeah, simply microdAOs are passive consent, active consent, as I like to call it. Everyone has to be and make decisions together. Next, the designs for shit. Yeah, I have unstable internet connection.
Well, we heard that clearly. but yeah,
I'm glad you did. Is that better?
Yeah. Try again.
Okay, so microdAOs allow for small teams to pay themselves and pay other people MicroDAOs can be clusters. A MicroDAO can send money to another MicroDAO. This means that the MicroDAO is upgradable. One, if it's a contract, you can transfer it to a different contract, because it's in the end it's just a stacks principle. You can have clusters of microDAOs based on this idea as well, because you can either have a central DAO that has representatives of all the microDAOs, and this is for well-coordinated efforts. Having these representatives from all these microDAOs allows for them to pool their resources into one project. So this means easier collaboration and coordination, and a move away from force or violence in decision making in terms of voting, because the design of the Stacks network allows for microDAO members to descend on the macroDAO in a way that in terms of, if someone is a member of a microDAO that is a member of the macroDAO, they can descend to a proposal that is higher up. Of course, I don't wish that happens ever, if we even like have that structure around. But this is allowed. I'm glad that Stacks network allows for something like that. And since it's simple, having something, especially like with other solutions like the consensus flow, having simple solutions that people can understand is much better than having a complicated solution that can solve all the headaches that governance has. We're not here to solve the issues of the pre-existing democratic governance processes. We're just presenting something that is simpler. The approach. This is in the end. This is a smart contract. The approach to use it through Discord has been like a decision to keep people in the same place, that they discuss things, that they agree on things, that they propose ideas, and not have them like on a different platform that they need to understand, and a learning curve. We're just like meeting people where they are. All of our designs are centered around where people are at, not where we want them to be. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
No, thank you, Kami, man. And no worries on a live demo. Obviously, the internet connection. I'm glad we can hear you clearly. You came through clear on that try. And yeah, some of the things that you spoke to, I think are really important, right? We spoke a little bit to dissent and what it can amount to, right? In terms of cohesiveness, right? All the way to the top. And the idea is that things are going to come up in these microDAOs, which, in the advocates, as of now, you can come up on journeys without being exposed to some of the other parts of our system design for, specifically governance, right? This is one way for folks to organize, tooling for folks to organize amongst each other, extension of the grants program, potentially, right? But the idea is that when problems do arise, right, they can plug right into some of the consensus flow tooling that Haz mentioned, right? And yeah, it is one of the realizations for myself too is, things do get a whole lot more complicated with some of the fundamental changes in these democratic structures away from these matrilineal native structures. There's a 3-branch system with the native structures as well, but it seems to encompass a whole lot more than the 3-branch system that we're most familiar with, or some of the governance structures that we're most familiar with, right? It even encompasses the organization on the ground, right? And how to facilitate, how to organize, and how to engender engagement and evolution on the ground. So that's one of the things that is coming about in some of the realizations in this this documentation here, and the system design part that folks can plug into, right? Right from those journey structures. And so one of the things that we realize, it looks like there's a problem with this image as well. But one of the things that we realize is, the streamlining of autonomous processes that are possible, that usually a problem with conflict resolution is gridlock, usually a problem with trying to have consensus instead of majority vote, right, is this gridlock thing. But I think that's where Turtle, Wolf, and Bear really start to come into play in terms of, the flows in decision making, how they are directly attached to these core values and functions that people self-identify with in the system on the ground, right? And for the representatives to also have that similar language, or there would be a direct line to the representatives through that this Turtle, Wolf, and Bear connection, right? And there's a lot into the nuances of Turtle, Wolf, and Bear that are some of the harder parts to communicate about system design, but they ultimately touch on these fundamental elements of organization. You have these Turtle with this, this baseline foundation, right? This of constitution in the more older sense of like what we're all made up of, right? What we can all agree on in terms of what we're all made up of.
Harold.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gotta wrap up, Harold. Gotta wrap up.
Yeah, we have a meeting. We have a meeting here soon. But this is, some of the things we hope we can touch on in future meetings as it relates to some of the system design stuff and how it can be directly attached from, what's going on the ground, and how decision-making flows and protocols happen, or how this gives you the best potential for consensus and the streamlining as opposed to gridlock, and a maximizing of voices as opposed to a minimizing of voices that you would likely see in conventional boardrooms. And so this is, some of the things that, we'll touch on in future dialogues, and we'll pass on some of these gems that we feel we've learned from this direct Indigenous dialogue. And I'll shut up, but there's, I think, a lot of time for us to get into some of this stuff later, and some documentation here in the meantime. And we'll be doing some live testing of this stuff in the advocates to give you some more nuanced updates too. So thank you kindly, y'all, for being here. We have a hard stop, unfortunately, today. We usually go on a little bit longer if we need to, but myself and Haas do have a session to get into right away. But thank you kindly, Jason and Andre, for taking the time. And I know we might have lost Andre, but Jason, thank you kindly. We'll see you soon, I think. And you can see me in the forums of Citicoins, and yeah, we'll get into all the nuances of this stuff. Thank you kindly for connecting these threads, these yarns.
Awesome. Appreciate you all. Thank you.
All right. See you guys soon.